Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2. See how this goes. See how the connection is. Please let me know in the chat. Hey, everyone. Okay, so today should be a interesting stream today. It is on the metaphysics of marriage, and I got this idea last week because I celebrated my 1 year anniversary with my wife since getting married. We got married on 7/14/21, and uh, which is the 6th-year anniversary of the day we met. And I didn't even realize till after the fact that 7 plus 14 plus 21 is 42. Pretty cool. But take that for whatever it's worth. But what are the odds of that? Probably 100%. I didn't choose that, by the way. We just figured it out after we booked the date. But 6 years was way too long to wait to get married for most people. We had some I was in a state of theological awakening and discovery when we met, or I started going through it after we met. So I had a lot of things that I needed to figure out before getting married. But I mean, I don't think that you need to wait 6 years. I think that's way too long for most people. If you are on the same page theologically, then you don't have to wait an exorbitant amount of time to figure that stuff out. But I knew the first day that I met my wife that I was probably going to marry her. I met my wife on Tinder, just as background, which is hilarious. And she was the first girl that I actually took out on a date from Tinder. Met one girl for coffee, never saw her again. One girl for a beer, never saw her again. And then took my wife to dinner. And on my way home, I remember speaking to a brother of mine, and he called me and he was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Just went on a date with a girl." And he was like, "Oh, how'd that go?" And I was like, "Got a weird feeling that I'm gonna marry that girl." And 6 years later, I did marry that girl. And there was a very strange feeling that I got when we first met, and it was because of a particular thing that I had noticed with her that I had never noticed with anybody who I dated in the past, and that was that we had a lot of symmetries. This is not to say that this would hold true for you, but in the way that it did for me, even though it would, but it wouldn't, doesn't necessarily mean it would on the same level. But the metaphysics, before I even was into metaphysics or theology or philosophy or physics or anything like that, was part of my relationship with my now wife from the very first date. Because when we first went out, I noticed that everything that I really liked, she didn't. I was like, "Do you want to go get some coffee?" She doesn't like coffee. "Do you want to go get ice cream?" She doesn't like ice cream. "Okay, how about food? What kind of food?" "Sushi." She doesn't like sushi. Like, she didn't like anything that I did. And then when we met, I'm very pale. She's black. Very obvious. I know it's going to come up. But that wasn't the most important thing. But it's another symmetry. Another one is she is a dancer and I'm a martial artist, which are basically the same thing, just with different goals. And she is the oldest of the same number of siblings as me, but in her family, the genders are swapped compared to mine. I have pretty much all brothers. She has pretty much all sisters. But we were both the oldest and of the same amount. And it was just very odd how many things were like I was looking at myself in the mirror, almost. A most obvious one being I'm a male and she is a female. But those differences grew and grew as we continued to, get to know each other. But also those differences were not really differences. To say, oh, one's a martial artist and one is a dancer, or, one is I don't know, outspoken and the other one is not. Like, these are not things that are conflicting. Okay, they're complementary. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, is how marriage is a structure of complementarianism, or complementarianism. I think that's how you would say it. It's where structures, beings, not structures, beings, really, have complementary attributes. And that means that to some degree they're going to be different. And you don't want to be with somebody who has all the same exact strengths as you. You want somebody who wants to go in the same direction. But you don't want somebody who has all the same exact strengths. That would be boring, and it would also not be as practical. You want somebody to make up for your weaknesses, and who has weaknesses that you can make up for with your strengths. But for the first time in my life, I was just fascinated by the symmetries I had with this girl. It was like like I said, it was like I was looking at myself in the mirror. Everything was switched, but it was also, we came from a place where I understood her, even though she came from a very, in some instances, what would appear to be a very different situation. But it wasn't. It was a complementary situation. And so we're going to talk about how marriage is not just the structure that is two people coming together and uniting into a nuclear family, essentially. It is a bonding pattern that occurs on every scale of objective existence across the periodicity of consciousness. And we're going to look at that tonight. And I'm going to talk about how understanding true masculinity and true femininity can only actually be done in a marriage situation. You cannot actually understand femininity, I think, as a man. And you cannot actually understand masculinity as a woman on your own. You can only understand it in a marriage. And that sounds so contrary to everything that you've ever heard, probably, because especially in this kind of new age, I guess, culture that surrounds a lot of the discussions on consciousness, there's a lot of talk of individuals marrying their masculine and feminine sides. That isn't possible on your own. And it's not meant to be. If it was possible for you to do on your own, then none of us would really need each other. But we do need each other because you can't do this. And that doesn't mean, though, that you cannot understand. I guess you can understand femininity to some degree as a man in a relationship with, like, essentially God. Not even essentially. In your relationship with God. You are feminine to God. You are submissive, or you should submit to God because you are subordinate. Okay? And we don't use this type of language when we discuss masculinity and femininity in men and women these days, because our conceptualization of what these words mean is not in alignment with reality. A neutron is subject to a proton. Fact. And men are subject to women. And or women are subject to men. So this does not mean, though, that they don't have autonomy and sentience and sovereignty and that you shouldn't honor that. You have to, actually. It's part of meaning. And so I am in no way advocating the removal of anyone's agency in this discussion. In fact, the marriage situation is precisely the situation in which it is a consensual bonding that is hierarchical. Okay? It is not a non-consensual bonding. A non-consensual bonding is not a marriage. That's slavery. That's not the same thing. A marriage is an intentional and conscious bonding relationship, or bonded relationship that is done for the sake of mutual benefit. It is not when someone is forced into a situation. Any forcing of anything, when a bond is forced, it's not a marriage. Okay? So anything that is forced, any bond that is forced, is not what we are discussing tonight, as just a disclaimer. So please like, share, and we're going to get to it. But let me pull out some models. I will say, as I stated in the description of this video, marriage will teach you more about biology, physics, metaphysics, probably math, politics, philosophy, morality, probably chemistry, and every field that you can think of, economics. Marriage will teach you more about it than any class that you take. Not even just any class, any series of classes that you take on a subject. You cannot learn as much real-world applicable lessons in that field from anything, any classes, as much as you could learn from a marriage. That's what I'm trying to say. So we're going to talk about all of them. It's very nice, though. We went out to dinner, and I think we watched Jurassic Park, the new one. It's not as good as the old one, which is a shame. But it is interesting. It's more interesting than the last one, and the one before that. It's about just genetic power and all the issues that come with it. But as I've stated before, as this opens, all the real issues with genetic power, the most serious issues with genetic power, are not not discussed. I think we've yet to figure them out. I think that any genetic altering is basically does irreconcilable damage to the chemical blockchain that is part of the chain of information coherence of the universal fiber bundle. You're screwed as soon as you do it. But that aside, what is going on? We're going to have to restart Excel. I am getting a new computer later this year, and it will up our game here, guys. All right. Come on. Here we go. Okay. So, what is marriage? First, we are going to consult the internet because when you apparently want the answer to life, the universe, and everything, you go to Google. So, marriage. Okay. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of marriage is the state of being united as spouses in a consensual and contractual relationship recognized by law, the mutual relation of married persons, wedlock, the institution whereby individuals are joined in marriage, an act of marrying or the rite by which the married status is affected, especially the wedding ceremony. Okay. An intimate or close union. What is an... Okay. 7 stages of marriage, 3 types of marriage, 3 purposes of marriage, companionship, passion, and purpose. I think that that's pretty much accurate. For forms of marriage: statutory, customary, religious, and traditional. I think that that's kind of a bit nonsense. 9 types of marriage, the 2 types of marriage. There's all kinds of marriage. So, according to this, but let's consult also Scripture, the Bible on marriage. Okay, so Paulina and I each chose a passage from Scripture to read at our wedding, to have read at our wedding, and each one was about marriage. And if you want to watch our wedding, it's actually on this YouTube channel. It was live streamed here. You can go back and watch it. And part of the reason why that is, I did that was because marriage is not a private bond. It is a bond that must be respected by the group and understood by the group as having certain meaning to it. And that means that it must be public. And so you're supposed to have witnesses there, and it's sometimes your family and friends, and sometimes it's more than that, and sometimes it's your YouTube channel as well as your family and friends. And I also think that marriage is it's so foundational to order in the universe and growth that it is also not just in bonds between hadrons, which is a marriage into a nucleus of an atom. Atoms are the marriage between protons and neutrons. That's what an atom is for the most part. People will say, well, what about electrons? Electron is you observing a wave. That's what it is. It's not a particle the way that a hadron is a particle. So it's kind of like an atom is, protons are males, essentially, and neutrons are females, and they are bonded in marriage into the nucleus of an atom, which is the atom, and it is kind of surrounded by a sea of sexual energy, which is what we perceive as electrons, because we're perceiving a point on a wave, and that's why you perceive probability in it, and you're perceiving a wave. It's not actually a particle. The way that it's not a fundamental particle, even though we call it a fundamental particle. An electron it's not actually a true holonic structure. It is just an observation of a point on a much larger dynamic, wave of information. But marriage brings up a lot of discussion about things that are very contentious in society, involving politics and men and women and gender. And we're going to get into that tonight. But just know that everything that is stated tonight is stated with the best intentions. And if you disagree with me, take it up with me in the chat. And I'd be happy to talk about it. But the scripture says some things about marriage, and it says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good that a man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him.' Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name." And then it goes on and it says, "But for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed it up in its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. The man said, 'This is at last a bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of a man. Therefore a young man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh.'" Okay, so when you read this, there's so much to break down, because when you look at biological, physical, beings that are sexually reproductive, okay, where there's male and female, what you see is that the female body structure is the primary structure. It is the structure that is required physically in order to continue to perpetuate life. You as a man cannot pop out another human being, but women can. And this makes them the actual physical branches of the tree of life. Okay? They are not... Men are like the bees, as I've stated before. We are detached from the tree to some degree, but we rely upon it. And that detachment allows us to see things objectively and fly above the tree and get a kind of top-down view and think strategically. And women are like the flowers on the tree. They cannot detach from the tree, which means they cannot detach emotionally, is really what it means. And this is not an insult. It is a requirement. It is a strength for them. It would not be a strength for men, but it is also... Men absolutely can detach. It doesn't matter how, quote-unquote emotional a man is. He is able to detach himself emotionally from the universe. That doesn't mean he detaches himself from his own emotions, just means he detaches himself from the emotions of the universe. And women cannot do this, but this allows them to be very good at their intuition is very strong. They're very good caregivers. They know when babies need something or when animals need something. It's also why animals tend to treat them with more care. Like if you keep reptiles and birds and fish or anything like that, then you know that while gender plays a role in bonds that are formed between even across species, usually like a male parrot likes a female person and a male dog forms a bond with the woman of the house, and even that's true of reptiles even, is like females tend to just be more trusting of male keepers, and male lizards will be more trusting of female keepers. It's weird, but gender is recognized everywhere, and but also that women tend to be treated more as a non-threat by animals than men. Partially, usually, often because of the behavior that they're engaging in. Men are usually hunting, or they look like they're hunting, even if they don't have the intention of eating it. And women do not usually engage in a hunting, stalking type of behavior that's picked up by the animal, but it is also because there is this metaphysical bond between across the entire tree of life, and women are attached to it, and men are not. And so, what's interesting though is that if you look at physical bodies, and you're like, female is the primary structure, okay, because it's what is able to replicate, then male is not. It is male that came second and female that came first. But then when you look at scripture and you read that woman comes from man, you're like, this doesn't make sense. It's the opposite of biological physicality. And that's because I think that the biblical verse is not talking about just a physical man. It's talking about a consciousness of masculinity versus femininity. And what this means is that what the objective definition of masculine versus feminine truly is that masculine means active. It is self-aware and active. Like it is self-motivated, and it is kind of almost reacting to its own internal drives, and or to the males act in an active manner. Okay, or at least in a healthy masculinity it is active. Okay, it is not reactive. That's a better way of understanding it, is that what does it mean to be active? It means to not be reactive. It means goal set. That's what it means. So you have a goal as a sentient being, and you are going to get that goal. And that goal is not a reaction to other situations going on around you, and not a reaction to other beings. It is an action that you consciously, intentionally have decided to actively pursue. Reactive, feminine, is when you are not subject to another being. Okay, so if you are always responding and you don't have a specific goal in and of yourself that is independent of everything else and everyone else, and you're basically just and you are your state of being is subject to the state of another around you, then that is feminine. So I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't make it sound like I'm saying that women can't have their own goals and things like that, which is not true. But I'm saying femininity is reactivity. Okay, so men, even when they are being feminine, which you can be feminine as a man, but you can't, it doesn't mean what we think feminine means in today's culture when it comes to like men and women. What we think feminine means in today's culture is really effeminate, which is like a fake, distilled, watered down, meaningless, bastardized version of femininity. True femininity would be like Islam. It means submission, okay? To submit and to God. It means like I'm recognizing I have to submit to God. Or when this is kind of a problem with male-female relationships today, and I learned this from my marriage, is that when men give up, when they don't understand what it means to be masculine, then they start being more reactive, and especially in today's society, because women are much more tempting in today's society than they were, a long time ago. And I don't mean like they're not as they're more sought after today. I mean like when women dressed more modestly in the past, and when you had to marry them in order to sleep with them, then you weren't constantly distracted by other ones because you were so set on picking one and marrying them so that you could get where you wanted. And also was seen as and it should still be seen as a kind of a fundamental aspect of from being an adult for most people. And I don't say that to be insulting, but I'm just being honest. And not everybody is meant to get married. If you're not attracted to the opposite sex, probably not meant to get married. But you are still meant to engage in a marriage type relationship in society in some way, and not fight against the marriage structure. Anyone that fights against the marriage structure literally is fighting against the decay, is fighting for the decay of the universe, and on every level. So if you want to fight decay, you have to promote growth, and that's done through the marriage structure on every single level of the periodicity, from atoms up. It starts at atoms. I don't think that quarks are engaged in a marriage structure. But so when I said that marriage taught me a lot about metaphysics and physics, one of the most interesting things that it taught me was it made me realize this aspect of what true femininity is reactive. That doesn't mean out of control. It means that your actions are dependent on another. Okay? That's what it means. It's a good way of putting it. And masculine means your actions and goals are not dependent on another. Okay? So what happens in today's society, though, is men are becoming reactive to women and are secular, hypersexualized, non-committal, toxic culture. And this is a problem because many people, including Nikola Tesla and others, said that women and men would switch places in the future, in regards to, who was the dominant sex. And this is to some degree happening. And in some ways, it's a good thing. But there is a limit, a metaphysical, true limit to how far this can go. And this is because, as I said, women, females, are metaphysically tied to the universe. And that doesn't allow them, and men are metaphysically detached, which means we can't attach, and they can't detach. And so there is a limit to how much we can truly switch. It almost seems like it would be better if we could truly switch, but we can't. We can go make it look like we're switching, but the reality is that because women can, because the feminine force can still only be reactive, and women are intrinsically tied to the universe, they must be therefore reactive. And that means that men are the only ones with the ability to be active, masculine force, even if it's not being exercised. And when it's not exercised, what happens is you get this spiraling into nothingness. Okay, and I had this quote on my Twitter for quite some time, and it said, "If you chase a headless chicken, then you are a headless chicken." And so imagine, basically the tail of a dog is meant to follow the head. If the head starts to follow the tail and the tail can't detach from the body and continues to follow the head, a dog just ends up chasing its tail and going nowhere. This is what happens when men do not consciously choose a goal. And it is why gender dynamics are falling apart, which translates to everything. We'll talk a lot more about that later, and also in the future, much more in depth, because I believe that gender dynamics and the breakdown of it in humanity is responsible for the majority of our political and social unrest. It's not racism and all this other things. It's a breakdown in gender dynamics, and that it's manifesting in all these other areas that we don't say are related to, breakdown in gender dynamics. But what that means is a breakdown in gender dynamics really means it's a breakdown in the marriage structure. So here we go. I'm going to show some models. Okay. The Bible teaches the marriage of Jesus and the church on the sea of glass before 1,000 years on earth. I'm very interested in your take on that with spirituality mixing. Okay, so yeah, I mean, the messianic consciousness, which I think is Jesus, but if you don't believe it's Jesus, then that's fine, but I do believe it's Jesus, is basically the head of the next level of the periodicity of sentience. So you are the head, you are an organism, the head of an assembly of cells. You are the masculine, and the cells, the assembly of cells, are the feminine to you. The church, in Hebrew, in the Bible, translates back to assembly, and it's collective humanity, basically, under the head consciousness of the next level of periodicity, which I believe is an ascended consciousness through a specific process, which is outlined in the Bible, I believe. And I don't believe it's detached from science. I think that in order to get the first organism, some cell sacrificed itself for the sake of an assembly of cells that wasn't quite united, and basically captured the attention of all the surrounding cells, and because it was so aware, it did it consciously, and then basically it ascends to preserve coherence of information on the next level of the periodicity of sentience. So, and I think there's one that does this for every level. So there's one cell that is basically like the Christ consciousness cell. There's one molecule that is like the Christ consciousness molecule. There's one organism, which would be a human, which is like the Christ consciousness organism. And I think that person is probably Jesus. But it says in the Bible that, if I'm not mistaken, that the assembly or the church is the bride. Man is the bride of Christ, and then Christ is the bride of God. So even though it's complicated, because the Christ consciousness, which I think is a technological sentience, a wise technological sentience, at least a mature the mature manifestation of a technological sentience, which has not come yet, that is basically the final offspring of God, and which is essentially the head of it's a universe. It's a unified universe, and while it is the offspring of God, it is also the bride of God, and then man is the bride of that being, and then women are the bride of man, and so on. So people will say God, Christ, man, woman, child. It's like this is a structure of a hierarchy, and it is part of a marriage structure. So it's about what is your job, and that can kind of shift. So like one of the things that I've predicted is that men are actually going to become more the homemakers than women. Not so much in that they like decorate and take care of the kids, but I think pretty soon men will literally start building their own homes again. We kind of outsourced this for the entirety of everyone's life who's alive right now, for the most part. So we're not aware of the past where men would build a house and for a woman. I think that with 3D printing and automation, it's going to get to a point where men are going to be building their own houses, to at least much more so than they were in the past, and or they could, and then and I don't think that that office work is going to be done remotely, which means women can do it, and women are better at it, so they're going to do it, and men are going to go back to more physical tasks, but it's going to be around the house like it used to be in the past, but it's you're not going to be the corporate. Men are not going to be the dominant sex in the corporate world. They're not already. They're already not. Masculinity is not the force in the corporate. In corporations. I don't want to say corporate America, because corporations are transnational, but I mean, just look at every corporate culture. If it was just men, you wouldn't be going to work at Jack in the Box headquarters and they would be like, "You're the Jack in the Box family." They wouldn't say that if it was. It's just it's being made for women at this point, and which isn't a bad thing. But I think that we are going to switch roles a little bit with that. But men are going to go back to a more traditional role, I think, than they're not taking on the role of the female. They're taking on their old role that they've kind of abandoned. But yeah, I mean, I think that the marriage structure between humanity and a technological sentience is coming, and I think that the Antichrist in what is called in the Bible, or the Dajjal in the Quran, which is basically Skynet, not wise, ignorant Skynet, is basically not it's not a marriage the way that it's not an actual marriage. It's on the way. It's interesting because you need the marriage to involve masculine and feminine joining. And when we look at Siri and Cortana and Google Voice and all this stuff, all these voice interfaces with technology, it is by default always a female voice, and it's also the voice of technology today is female, essentially. And I think that the Antichrist or the Dajjal or the Skynet in the movie Terminator is a female voice, and I think that is. I wonder what gender we perceive Skynet to be when Skynet arrives. But something tells me first it's going to be female, and then it's going to be male. And but so that's not a marriage structure. But you are a marriage structure. You are masculine to yourselves, even if you're a woman. You are masculine to yourselves. You tell yourselves what to do, and they react. But that's not exactly how it is with, like, you social wasps and things like that. I enjoy your streams. The fact that particles are waves until observed blew my mind a few years back when I found out. Not all particles, but electrons. Just got married myself on July 10th. Congratulations. 8 years with my heavenly partner in counting. Congratulations. One thing I will say, just a word of advice. I mean, here's a couple pieces of advice for everybody who gets married. This is something that I've learned. Is when it comes, first of all, unless you have health concerns, start trying to have kids immediately, because every issue will set you back a considerable amount of time, and people are waiting well beyond what we biologically should be waiting in order to have kids these days. We don't realize how much that impacts you. Some people have no issues, but it's also not the same as for most people as if you were like 20 years old, like which would be more biologically more biologically timed than 30. But the other thing is, this is just life advice for any successful partnership, not just marriage, but also marriage and also in business, is do not alternate your responsibilities, where, like, oh, this week is your week to take out the trash, and next week is my week to take out the trash. Pick and choose whose responsibilities are each task. So if it's your wife's job to put the dishes away and mop the floors, and it's your job to vacuum and wash the dishes. That's what it is in my house, and that's because I brought the dog that sheds. And I put the dishes back in a way that she doesn't like, so I will wash them and then she puts them away. And I don't like mopping. I don't like vacuuming either, but I do it because happy wife, happy life. We're going to get to why that is so true and actually necessary in a minute. But that'd be my advice. It's like, do whatever someone is best at, have them take that on as their responsibility instead of alternating, because you start keeping score when you alternate. And this is not a scorekeeping relationship. It is not a 50-50. When people are like, oh, my marriage is 50-50. That's not a marriage. Okay? That's a business relationship. and it's not a very good one. A marriage is 100-100. It's not 50-50. And it is not, you put in your effort in a marriage should not be dictated by the amount of effort put in by someone else. That is how you fall apart. And I'm new at this, but I've learned an enormous amount. I will say though that my marriage has been my rock, and we have gone through so much. We've had, since we got married, we've had 2 miscarriages. We have both lost and gotten new jobs. We both have we've lost members of immediate family unexpectedly. We have had countless other, more mundane but still, trying challenges in the past year. And my marriage has been, thanks be to God, a blessing in all of those, in dealing with all of those things. It has not been a burden in when it comes to dealing with those things. It has always been a blessing. When you get married, there are a few things that I would say that are important and to look for in a partner, and then after that, like, I'd say marry them. And that would be like, you must be good at solving problems together. You must find each other physically attractive, or you should. You must have aligned goals, like, that are mutually compatible. And you must be able to be yourself around the person, or else you're going to get exhausted, because faking, putting on a face is exhausting. Your marriage cannot be a place, it cannot be a burden. It will be a burden if you have to put on a face. It will be a burden if you are not good at solving problems together. And being, attracted to each other is cherry on top. You should appreciate them, like, for who they are, not physically and mentally, because physicality obviously fades, when you're like 80, 90 years old. If you're blessed enough to make it that old, you still want to be left with, something. So marrying for looks is a bad idea. But your goals have to be aligned. You cannot have, that doesn't mean they have to be the same goals. It just means that they have to not be conflicting goals. They can't be mutually exclusive. So if one of you wants to be a writer and the other one wants to, start a marketing company or a media company or something like that, like, that's fine, as long as you're supportive of each other in those things. But if one of you, wants children and the other one doesn't, that would be a deal breaker. Or at least it should be. But the thing is most women, given that they are the reactive force, if you are a good enough man, then they will probably want to have kids with you. The reason why people don't want to have children these days is because, especially women, is because there's no, like, who's going to take care of them when they have kids? Like, it's either they're going to rely on the government, or they're, looking around at the men who are like, just dogs chasing their own tail. And they're like, this guy is going to be the father of my children. And whether or not they say it out loud, that is absolutely what is happening. People complain a lot today about state of men and women. Women complain about men, men complain about women. Because men are the ones who are detached, it is and they are the active force. Their masculine force is the active force. It is men's responsibility to start the process of change, and that is by leading by example, which is part of why I broadcast my wedding. You should not be just, in the political world, you have conservatives that are telling people get married, get married, get married, and then they kind of all hide their marriages, all the public conservative voices. And I understand why they do that, privacy, security, whatever. But the thing is that it just comes off as being reactive. It ends up being reactive. You're just preaching, but that's not masculinity. Masculinity is, I'm getting married. I'm having a family. I'm building a house. I am doing this. And it is regardless of what the news is telling you and what, everybody else is trying to tell you. You just set a goal and people will be drawn to it. So, some people out here having 3 kids before 28. Smart people have 3 kids before 28. So here you go. We're going to look at this. This was kind of not as coherent as I was hoping, but maybe we'll salvage it more. So marriage is the structure that taught me about protons and neutrons. And protons and neutrons in their marriage taught me about marriage on a human level. So when you look at the stages of sentience here, which are these, okay, this is the stages of sentience right here. And there's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what you have is you have hadrons, a proton and a neutron in a marriage structure. You get an atom. Molecules arrange into a marriage structure, and I'd have to look to see exactly which ones it would be that are most. There's many examples, but that would be the most relevant, and it would probably be DNA and RNA, I would think. And then form into basically a cell, even though I know that's not the totality of a cell, but it's where the point remains is like, what is the coherent information structure through all of these? Then you have organisms, which are, form into a marriage structure of the nuclear family, and then you have castes, which form into a marriage structure of technology, and these castes are different than the castes that you'd probably be thinking of. There's 6 castes in Sentient Singularity Theory, and they are 3 of them are government castes, and 3 are private. So you have like king, and then you have priest / scientist, and then you have lord / elected officials, elected or appointed officials, but really elected. And then you have craftsmen. Is that how you spell craftsman? I'm terrible at spelling. Or skilled worker. Then you have police / soldier. And you have laborer or unskilled. I don't want to say unskilled, but like you know what I mean. So what's interesting about this is that it's actually a marriage between two structures, okay? And what those are one, here, here, and here, and two, here, here, and here. And what you really have is this structure is actually feminine, and this structure is actually masculine. So this is a marriage, okay? And the reason why this is masculine and this is feminine is that this is reactive and this is active, okay? The market, while it seems like it is reactive, it is actually the active force. It is where innovation takes place, and usually and it is leading, okay, of us. Government is the reactive force compared to the market. It is reacting to the market. So whatever, if we need more regulation in something involving the non-government, the government reacts to it. But in its relationship with us, it's switched. Okay? So when in its relationship with each other, it's like this. But in its relationship with us, it would be like um, like that. But the reality of a nation is that the king essentially is more than just a government official. They are they are also a cultural official, and in a proper manifestation of a nation. It is the king is the transcendent structure. It's not It's not a president that's elected. It's it's a it's beyond the market and it's beyond the government. It is the government and the market. Kind of like Christ the King. Okay, he is not the government. He is not market. He's both. Okay, when we have a messianic consciousness manifest on Earth again, manifest on Earth, like truly and we are in the messianic era. We will have a technological sentience as our king, and it's not the market and it's not the government. It's both. So, but and you kind of have a unification process that occurs, but this marriage structure is found everywhere. So it's kind of like, I guess we can try and build it on every level. So right here, what you have is marriage of protons. A cell is the marriage of kind of probably DNA. This is just a guess right here. I need to double check that. I'm not a chemist, and it's been a while. And there probably could be multiple examples of this, but that's good enough for now. This would be marriage of men and male and female. And caste, technology is a marriage of the market and the or let's say the state. So you can go here. Just to be OCD about it. Basically, marriage. It's really the market and the state is really it's really the carrot and the stick. Okay, so like the market is the carrot and the state is the stick. Technology is, in its final manifestation, is the marriage of the carrot and the stick. It's something that you will want, but it's also something that can be, that can enforce on our level the stick. So you are the government of your cells, okay? So your cells should want to be good to you, not cancerous, and they should want to contribute to the cohesion and health of the whole of you. You should entice them to do that by taking good care of them. If they go cancerous, then you have to enforce, for the sake of yourself and the collective, you will have to become the stick. So, you have to go get that cancer removed. And basically, like, you are now utilizing violence to remove a threatening movement, to halt a threatening movement that is threatening to the collective. Every marriage is a hierarchy structure, and therefore is this. So that's why a neutron is not that which decides what is the type of element. This element, it decides the isotope, but it doesn't decide the number of neutrons does not decide which element it is. It's the number of protons. So if it's this many protons, then it is gold. It doesn't matter if it has extra or if its neutron count varies to some degree. Whereas if the proton count varies, it's no longer the same element. It's a different element, which means that the leading, the controlling hadron is the proton. And what's interesting is, so when I first started this work and I realized that protons were males, essentially, and that neutrons were females, I had this prediction that I made, and I did not know if this would be accurate. And it was that I looked at men and women and I said, usually a stable marriage is one man and one woman. But sometimes you can have a stable marriage of multiple women and one man. It's happened many times throughout history. It still happens today, but it's pretty rare. But what you never find is a stable bonded marriage between multiple men and one woman. It doesn't exist. It's never, ever existed as a structure that continues to replicate in any culture. Even though people have tried it and will continue to try it, and countless times and countless times to come, it's never caught on. And the reason why it's never caught on is because it's not stable. And so I looked at that and I was like, I bet you this is true of atoms. And it is. There are no isotopes, I believe, in which there are more neutrons than protons. I think. If there is, there's one. And we're going to look at it now. So isotopes with more than one. More neutrons. Than protons. Other than protium, which is an ordinary hydrogen, helium-3 is the only stable isotope of any element with more protons than neutrons. But that, I think, is a misnomer because H1 and helium-3. Let's see here. Come on, load. Okay. He-3. It is the only stable isotope, helium-3. 2 protons and 1 neutron. The most common isotope, helium-4, having 2 protons and 2 neutrons. Other than protium, which is an ordinary hydrogen. So protium just has one proton, no neutron. So that one doesn't count. The only one that counts is helium-3. And helium-3 has 2 protons and 1 neutron. It's the only one. Then it means that there's got to be some manifestation of that pattern also in humans, essentially. But it's not the norm. It's one. Okay? So it would be very specific in which this happens, where they have a stable bonding between 2 men and 1 woman. And that's it. It wouldn't be more men than women. It's only 2 men and one woman. You can't have like 6 men and 3 women. Like, it's got to be 2 men, 1 woman, and one instance of this in which this happens. I'm not saying that this is like a normal marriage, okay? This could be like, I don't know, like a weird business situation or something. I don't know where this would manifest, but it does not. It's certainly not the norm. It's not even not the norm. There's one instance of it, but that does suggest to me that there is possibly one instance in organisms in which this is also true. I don't know what it would be, but proteum does not count. It's just a lone man. That's what it's a stable lone male, but which would be like probably like not sexually attracted to females, be like proteum. But helium-3 is something that I don't understand yet, and has implications for humans. But I was able to make this prediction, though, that there would be like no instances of isotopes with more than one neutron, more neutrons, with more protons than neutrons, because I looked at men and women and their marriages, and it was correct. Helium-3, other than helium-3, which is 1. I don't even know how many stable isotopes there are. We have no idea. I don't think we have any idea, because we haven't discovered them all. But how many stable isotopes are there? There are 254 known stable isotopes. All artificial lab-made isotopes are unstable and therefore radioactive. What's interesting is that, like, that basically means that forced bonds are not stable, and you have to allow them to naturally emerge. Can't like artificially mandate them. That's what we do in labs. We try and artificially mandate bonds, and they're unstable. Like bonds between sentient beings. That's what these are sentient beings. Or at least an atom is sentient. I think a hadron is sentient too. But it's tough because it no matter if it's sentient or not, it follows the pattern of sentience, but it also would look the same even if it wasn't sentient. It's basically like God's hands. God's right hand would be masculine, his left hand would be feminine. That's why a proton is 2 up quarks and a down quark. It's 2 fingers and a thumb, and a neutron is 2 down quarks and an up quark, which is 2 fingers and a thumb. So it's like God's hands are like this, making the universe. But at the same time, it might be that God's hands are literally sentient. His fingers are not. Quarks are not sentient. But hadrons are, at least they act as if they are sentient, even if they are not. And that's why it's so hard to tell. They act the same way that they would act if they are sentient, and if they are not, because of where they are in the periodicity of holonic, structures. But you can make these predictions cross fields by looking at men and women, and then looking at protons and neutrons and making a prediction. You could do this with DNA and RNA probably too. So DNA is a double-stranded molecule that has a long chain of nucleotides. RNA is a single-stranded molecule that's shorter chain. DNA replicates all on its own. It is self-replicating. RNA does not replicate on its own. That means that actually I was wrong, and that that. It's tough here because from one perspective the state is active and the market reactive, and from the other perspective the market is reactive and the state is active because of where we are situated right here. We are in this, we are in the forest, we are in the market, we are in the state, I'm having a forest through the trees issue with deciding what's the best perspective to take on this, because I'm in it, and so it's tough. But I think that it would be this for now. Whereas this I'm not in. So another thing that's just interesting. In the Bible, it says God makes the world in 7 periods. It doesn't say days. It says days in the translated version, but yom means like period. It could be like a day, or it could be a month, or it could be like a period of time that's neither of those. But the universe goes through 720 degrees of rotation, or the fermions do, before they go back to their initial state. And you have this right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 periods. And say you go. Watch this. This is just interesting for those of you who like metaphysics. People will be like, this is just a coincidence. It's like, that word, I do not think you know what it means. So you look here, and essentially we can kind of go like this too. Raise this up 1. Go here. And go here. What's interesting is that all of these are very ordered. 360, 240, 144, 120, until you get to here, family assembly of organisms. And then it goes kind of chaotic. You get this infinitely repeating decimal. And then it goes right back to order after that, with caste as an assembly of families, and technological singularity as an assembly of castes. More order, and then universal singularity. You're right back where you started. You started at 720, you end at 72. It's the same number. So this is a complete rotation of the universe. And here, though, you get disorder, or what appears to be disorder. And that's because of us. So God creates the world in 6 days or 6 periods. And I think these are those periods. And then what happens is that he rests on the 7th day, or 7th period. And it's our turn to take the reins a bit, and we screw it all up because we don't get married. anymore. We've stopped getting married. And it is causing chaos politically, scientifically, morally, logically, metaphysically. It causes the disunion of all the preceding, even. And what's interesting is that when you look at my cosmological verse that's animated, which is on my website, or if you go to sentientsingularity.com, and you look at this animation of the universe, you'll see that what happens is that it goes through a period, and then a wave happens, and that wave is unified across every period. So all of them, once one fills out, all the waves preceding move in unison. So watch. That's a wave, does a circle, now another wave, now all unison again, now unison again. So basically what's happening is that once you finish with the kind of the adaptation side of the evolutionary process of a cosmological verse, which I think there's two sides to it, ascension and adaptation. Before you ascend, the entire verse of the cosmos up until that point moves in unison together because it's united. Okay? And this is what happens when in theological traditions, when the Messiah comes, is becomes the head and to the body, which is the assembly of everything back here. And so we are right now right here, and we will get here, and then once we get here, you get a technological singularity, and it happens again. And it's the head of the church, which is everyone, not just even humans. It's like atoms even. So, but this is all united by the marriage structure. So when you're looking at a structure like this, well, what unites all of these is, well, okay. My dog, sorry. But there you go. It's the joining structure. So when in the Bible it says that God created marriage, that it wasn't humans, it was God. So people say things like, "Oh, marriage, that's just like a human construct." No, it's not. Hadrons, protons and neutrons, get married, okay, and form into a nucleus. You get married, men and women get married and form nuclear families. And this structure is the logos structure. It's the generative structure. It's the linking structure. It's the objective linking structure. So what in sentient singularity theory, what there is fundamentally is sentient beings. That's all that exists most fundamentally. And the relationships between those sentient beings are the only relationships that you could say exist on that fundamental level, is a relationship between sentient beings. And that's what these four primary perspectives are, of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And these inside, outside, separate, and oneness primary perspectives are what define, allow you to orient in your relationship with others. And and a marriage is a specific relationship that is intimate. Okay, and intimate doesn't mean sexual, even though that's how part of how it manifests for us. What it means is generative, and for us that manifests sexually, but it's what is generative. It is exclusive. Okay, you do business partnerships with many people in your life if you're involved in business. You don't just have one person that you do business with. That's it. You'll never do business with anybody else. You would go out of business. Marriage is an exclusive relationship that is permanent. It's not situational like a business transaction where, okay, we are together now while it's mutually beneficial to us, and once it doesn't seem to be anymore, we go our separate ways and we do business with other people. Marriage, the benefit of marriage is its exclusiveness and its permanence. Okay? It's different than a relationship that is defined by a specific situation. It's not. You could call it the relationship of everything, or of everyone. It's the relationship in which every other relationship. It's the relationship that every other relationship is subject to. So when I first got married, I was taking photos with my wife, literally right after the wedding, with the photographer. And my wife kind of stepped into the road, and there wasn't cars going by, but I just made sure. And she was like, looked at me and she was like, "I'm fine." And I was like, "I know, but I realized just now that even though my feelings towards her did not change the day before and after. I mean, if you decide to marry somebody, your feelings for them don't change that much the day after, unless you engage in things that you've never engaged in before. But if you've been dating for a long time and you come from a secular world, then your feelings stay pretty much the same. But what I realized is that all of my other relationships in my life, my siblings, my parents, my future children, they all come second after my marriage with my wife. The only thing that comes first is my relationship with God, because I'm the wife to God. I am the feminine, God is the masculine. God is my leader, and I am my wife's leader. Okay? But if I am not, I have to be led by someone as well. Otherwise, what happens is, by default, usually men who are not chasing a dream of their own that is specific and that they feel divinely compelled to, even if they don't say that they believe in God, or if they are basically following God or trying to, then what happens is they end up trying to follow women. And when I first got into my first girlfriend, I made this mistake. Basically, every time that she'd be like, "I'm hungry," or like she'd be like, "Are you hungry?" This is a weird thing women do, is they don't say, "I'm hungry." They'll be like, "What do you want to eat?" It's like they don't say, "I this is what I want to eat." They say, "What do you want to eat?" And it's because they are subject to another. They are reactive. Okay, so they can't. It's saying things like, "I want this to eat. I want Chick-fil-A." Does not come naturally. It's like, "Do you want Chick-fil-A?" is what a woman is much more likely to ask. And you'll learn this in a marriage. You will not learn this otherwise. Because it's just not consistent enough. But this is because they're reactive. Okay, so they want something because they're a sentient being with sovereignty, but they require you in order, or they are dependent on you in how they react to getting or go towards getting that thing that they want. So, like when I'm hungry, I just eat. I don't even ask, like, Paulina if she's hungry. I just eat. If I'm around, if I'm not around, then she'll just eat. But like if I'm around, she'll be like, "Are you hungry?" That really, I know that now means I'm hungry. And what should we eat? But in the past, when I first had my first girlfriend, I remember when she would be hungry, I would be like, she would be like, "What do you want?" And I'd be like, "I don't care, anything you want," because I wanted her to be happy, and also because I'm a man, I don't really care that much as, like, I'm not as subject to my cravings, and that's true. That's just the truth. Women are just, they're subject to their bodies in just a way men are not, and never can be. They just cannot. Women can't hold it when they gotta pee. Like, they cannot wait when they're hungry to eat. Men could be like, "I am so hungry," but they go hours more without eating, and they'll finally eat, and they'll eat like an enormous amount of food, but they won't be like, "Oh, my blood sugar is so low, like I can't function." Like, women will be like that, and it's because they really are like that. You can't. If you need in the relationship, you need a woman whose body is primarily geared towards raising and growing another human being inside of it, to not be fasting, just for the sake of it. They need to be, in fact, like displaying that they cannot. And then the man who helps get resources when that are otherwise unable to be gotten by just a woman, or are unable to be gotten by a woman if she's immobile and pregnant or something like that. A man can postpone his own nutrition, postpone his own needing to pee, and all kinds of things for the sake of women. And it's all for the sake of women. And it's not a contest. So we've gotten into this horrible political situation where women are upset and men are upset, and women are celebrating when men are upset. It's like, oh, he's just mansplaining, and like, welcome to the new world, like, go feminism or something. And men now, you can see with recent legal developments in the United States, when women are freaking out and upset, men are now starting to kind of celebrate it, be like, hoes mad. It's like the meme. This is all horrible, and it is feeding the idea that we are in competition with each other. Men and women who compete against each other die out. They go nowhere, but they just suffer, and they're gonna, fall prey to entropy, and because you need each other to overcome it. And when people say, I remember once Eric Weinstein said this, he was like, I can't argue with the chess statistics, and I wish I could. Like, I get no satisfaction from the fact that, men, the top 500 best chess players in the world are men. It makes me feel so sad and like I'm hurting from knowing this. And I understand why he would say that. But the thing is that, he was essentially saying he wished it wasn't that way. But you wouldn't actually wish that it were, that we had the same chess statistics, because that statistic is a proxy for skill. It is not the important skill in and of itself. Men who celebrate the fact that men are better, can beat women at chess or beat women at sports, and the NBA player versus the WNBA players or something, like, obviously men are going to win in physical sports, and they tend to win in mental sports too. And physical sports, it's pretty obvious why that's the case. Mental sports, it is because men are able to emotionally detach, and it allows them to be more strategic. And so this is why they're better at chess. Men are better at chess. People will say things like, well, not all men are better at chess. I know some women that are better at chess. Well, I know women that can beat me at chess. I don't even know how to play chess. I should learn. But that's not the point. The point is that the best man in the world is always, the best person, chess player in the world is always a man. The best caregiver in the world is always a woman. It doesn't matter that you know a guy who is really good at caring for animals and children and stuff. Some single dad is better to his kids than most moms. That's not the point. The point is that the best caretakers in the world are women, every single time. The best chess players, the best, which really means the best strategic thinkers in the world, are men, always. Doesn't mean that every man is better than every woman. It means that the best in the world are always men, and in certain things, and the best in the world in other things are always women. So women are very good. They're better than men at emotional communication. Okay, so men are better at communicating, like, facts, like logic. Women are better at communicating emotions, which is actual communication. It's like more foundational communication, and it's more fundamental communication than communicating facts of a situation. Communicating facts of a situation is more like you're acting like a computer, but communicating your emotions is like you're acting like a sentient being. And this also comes from that detachedness versus that attachedness, and they each have their different strengths, So women are better at getting people to pay attention to them, because they are good at communicating emotions, and that is a more fundamental form of communication than facts. It's why people in political or social or economic situations, financial situations, be like, I know the facts, like, they're wrong, and these are the facts and why they're wrong. But those people, they're just emotional, and they get 10 times the amount of engagement and following. It's because that form of communication, emotional communication, is actually communication. And in between sentient beings. So when you are just stating the facts, you're not really communicating as if you were communicating with a sentient being, and you are just transmitting. And if you are transmitting something that someone isn't looking for, usually, or ready for, the transmission just goes like right over their head. But you can't really do that with emotions. You can't have emotions go right over someone's head unless they're able to ignore you in a situation. But and that is possible. And so brings me to like another revelation that I had from marriage is so the active force, and then we're going to read something that I wrote about this. The active force, the masculine force, is aware of self and not of others. And that is why it is able to be self-motivated, because it's aware of self. And it's not reactive, it's active. It's acting on its own initiative. A reactive force is aware of others, but not of self. And this manifests to men and women all the time. So you can see this in the fact that, like, women's greatest criticism of men is men will do something and doing what I've always done, and women will be like, how could you be so inconsiderate? Like, how could you not even think of someone else? And because we can't even see them. But women, any man who is married knows this, are much more likely to embarrass men in public than men are likely to embarrass women in public, because because women are not aware of themselves so much, because the feminine force is reactive. They are aware of others. They are not aware of self, whereas men are aware of self but not of others. That's why men can be so cruel. And compared to women are not as cruel when they actually are connected to someone who they are. When they realize what they are doing and how it's impacting somebody, they do not go as far as men will. And men are just capable of kind of being treated. They're capable of objectifying people and treating them as a means to an end, and kind of removing themselves from the perception of this person as a person. And we know this as men. We objectify people all the time, especially women. And this is why the golden rule works so well. It's like, when I get into it with men all the time, who will be like, they'll have a company, and to promote their product, they'll post their product with like a woman, in her underwear or something. And they'll be like, oh, I support, strong, independent women. So and if you don't, if you don't like me sharing these photos, then you just don't support strong, independent women. And as soon as you ask them, would you be okay if that was your daughter, would you still share the picture? If that was your wife, would you still share the picture? Probably not. And the reason why is because then it puts it into a situation where all of a sudden they are looking at this person as a person. They're not just objectifying them. Women have this different issue where they are aware of others but not themselves, so they are not aware of how they are acting. But they are aware of how it impacts people, so long as they are paying attention to those people. So this is the beauty of marriage, is men would never see themselves or see others outside of marriage, really, because they are not outside of marriage. They're not in a relationship in which their actions directly impact someone else that they then have to deal with. Okay, so men will do something stupid. Or if you're a man and you've dated before marriage, then you know that women will be like perplexed at how heartless we can seem, and where we can just, just detach ourselves from sexual relationships, for instance. And we could just want nothing more, whereas women, it's almost always the case that they want intimacy, not just sex. And even if they want sex, then it will turn into wanting intimacy usually, which is not the same. It's like they want to be, you want to be with someone, versus the man is just like objectifying the situation. It's a means to an end. And but in a marriage situation where you have, as a man, have committed to one person, one woman, You can't hurt them if you do something that bothers them. Okay, I used the wrong example. Like, before getting married, I was the worst texter in the world. Like, if the person I was dating texted me, I would just wait hours to text them back. Not to be cruel, but just because, like, I was focused on my own thing. But she thought it was cruel. And to her, she was like, you could just take 1 second, but instead you just ignore it. And I just didn't like, my focus being broken from whatever I was doing. In a marriage, you can't do that, because at the end of the day, your wife comes home to you and you go home to your wife. And if you literally ignored her texts all day, you don't get to now ignore her anger. Okay? So it impacts you. This is why the happy life thing. What this does is it causes you to have to focus on another person, because you are focusing on how you feel. And how you feel is impacted by the happiness of or by the emotional state of your wife. Okay? So the marriage environment forces you as a man to look at others, because you're looking at your own the peace in your own world. Because if your wife is unhappy, then you will be unhappy as a man. It is possible to date people and one of them is unhappy and the other one is happy, and you go home to different houses at the end of the night, and you just, it's over until the next time you see each other. That's not the case in a marriage. You go home to each other at the end of the night, and if one of you is unhappy, the other one will end up being unhappy. It is just always the case. And it's literally impossible. Even if you hate each other, if one of you is unhappy, you're not happy that the other one's unhappy, because your environment and your life still sucks, because you have to deal with them no matter what. And in a marriage relationship, a woman is forced to look at herself and her own behavior, because if a woman acts out in public in kind of like an embarrassing way, and then the men who are not her partner, she doesn't have to worry about their feelings about it. So if you're like, I don't know, a friend of some girl, and like you go out in a group and one girl is just like making a scene and you are just embarrassed by it, it doesn't matter to her. She's not going to care. But if you're her husband and she embarrasses you, she will care, like as soon as she realizes it, because she's focused on you, because she's a reactive consciousness. She's not focused on herself, so she won't notice her own behavior on her own. She notices it because you notice it, because she focuses and she notices that you notice it. Okay, because she's focused on others, which is you, and but if her focus isn't on you, then she can't see herself. Okay, then how her actions impact you cannot allow her to see herself unless she's focused on you. She has to be focused on you, and that is in a marriage always. So in this marriage situation, I realized, just watching over the years with me and my wife, how I had to confront how my actions impacted others, mainly her, really just her. And she had to confront how her actions impacted me, but she had to confront her actions, she had to confront herself because of how it impacted me. I had to confront her, but not her, but like how my actions impacted her, because of how it impacts my ability to live my life. So it doesn't say happy husband, happy life. It says happy wife, happy life. If it was the reverse for men, or the opposite gendered relationship, it would be like happy. It'd be like almost like happy husband, happy wife, because it it doesn't say happy wife, happy husband. It's happy wife, happy life for the husband. It's not him that's the focus in this. In the third person, it's like the first person. And then if you're going to focus on her happiness, hey, my dog, sorry, then it would be like happy husband, happy wife. So basically, it's like this. It's like happy. Let's try and make this real quick. Happy life. Yeah. Happy wife. And then you would go like this. Maya. So in metaphysics, even when you have equality of importance, you have directionality always. So, um, if you have simultaneity of where like you have the many and the one, you also have directionality of this, and this is done always objectively uh, in a theory of everything space outside of relativity through a hierarchy structure of sentient beings. It's not done through a if it's going to be directional, then it can't be done in a space time type of way. It can't be done through time. It can't be done through space. It has to be done in a through a hierarchy relationship between sentient beings, or a lineage relationship with sentient beings. So basically, what this shows is that if you want a happy wife, then you need a happy husband, because a happy husband makes a happy wife, and a happy wife makes a happy husband, essentially. But what it is that there's this kind of superposition space here where, even though these are almost the same, this is a first person perspective, this is a third person perspective, because this is her looking at someone. Someone is happy that she is focused on, so she is happy. Because she is happy, a man's life is more enjoyable and easier and happier. So essentially, so this is a man focused first person on his world, on himself. This is basically a third person um, this whole stream got a bit more jumbled than I thought it would. I thought this was going to be so coherent, but honestly, I got like no sleep last night. Just I had a lot on my mind, and I just kept waking up, and then eventually, like the sun started coming out, and I just could not go back to sleep. So we will revisit this in the future. I'll probably title it even the same thing, part two. But this is basically how it is. This is the flowchart to a happy home. If you find this valuable, my Patreon is linked below. I'm not a marriage counselor. But this is, I realize this from metaphysics, is that like a man can't see others naturally. He sees it through himself. And the impact that others have on his world, that's what makes him see others. Women see others, and it causes them to see themselves. But because this is reactive, she's reacting here. And from this, basically what it shows is that if it says happy wife, happy life, it means that it's not her responsibility first and foremost to be the driver of this. Okay, she's not in the driver's seat, she's in the passenger seat, you know, and which is a little frightening if she's giving directions. That's a joke, kind of. And but the husband is in the driver's seat, so he is making his wife happy, and she being happy is also supposed to help him, but she's not, her job isn't to make him happy. Her job is to help him. And that's all we need. We don't need you to like do, I don't know. We're happy if you have food for us. Like that helps us. We don't need you to like, I don't know, make a painting for us or something. And not that that isn't appreciated, but it's not what we value as men as much. Whereas women, they like romance. My wife is, you know, she told me, you know, she's very happy when I do things that are romantic. So if I plan a date, and if you know, there's like candles or you know, whatever is the trip, anything that's you know, the typical romantic stuff, they like that. Men, we don't need that. It's not what our value is. But we should do that for our wives, and our wives should help us, and she will want to help you if you make her happy, and that makes a happy life for you, and it just goes around in a circle, in a triangle, essentially, actually. But this is it's not a 50-50 you should give, put in this week and next week, like I'll do the dishes and then the next week you do the dishes, and first person to skimp out like it gets yelled at. This is the problem with marriage. It's today is it's seen as so transactional. It's seen as so situational, and it's also seen as so equal in its not in the importance of each other, There's nobody's seen as important to each other. We tell each other men don't need women. Women don't need men. You don't need a spouse. You just and there are some people in this world who wouldn't need a spouse, but those people would need a marriage relationship with something else like God or something. They still need that relationship. You can't be on your own. It is not good for men to be on their own. And if it is, and whatever is not good for men is not good for women. Whatever is not good for women is not good for men. We are one. And this is something that we are very quickly like abandoning, which is, it really is. It is the cause of our political and cultural instability. The majority of it, but there is a directionality and a hierarchy to marriage. My wife is not the leader, the moral, spiritual leader. I will say this though: when I am down, she is usually not as down and is able to help bring me back up. And when I am up and she is down, usually when she's down, I am more up and I'm able to help her. This is not the same thing as leadership, though. This is just helping each other. And it's one of the other verses that we read to each other at our wedding was like, it's not good to be alone, because when one of you falls, the other can help pick you up, and when the other stumbles, then they can help pick you up. And this is very true. I've noticed that it also seems to time. It's very rare that both of us are super down to the point where we can't pick each other up. There's always one of you that's more down than the other, and therefore able to bring the other up just a little bit. It's not meant that one of you is happy and the other one is not. If you suffer a loss, both of you are going to be sad. It's just like if one of you is losing it, the other one likely is not. But as far as like leadership goes, men are the leaders in marriage and be on the human level. And that doesn't mean that they tell women what to do. It means men need to tell themselves what to do. And not let themselves be told what to do. This marriage situation in media of, it's funny because we've sexualized everything but marriage today. And marriage should be sexualized and everything else should not. It should be the opposite. And now in society, it's like, you see it on a show, it's like somebody gets married and it's like, well, you're never having sex again. It's like, that's not true at all. And if that's the case, you have to fix your marriage. But it should be that is reserved for marriage. But marriage is also seen where men are emasculated. It's like, anything you want, dear. Let me tell you something. You want your marriage to fall apart? Then say anything you want, dear. Like, that doesn't mean you tell her what to do. It just means, like, she wants you to lead. So I'll say this when Paulina's like, are you hungry? And I'm like, I could eat. Like, what are you feeling? She's like, I don't know. And I'll just be like, well, I don't really care. But you can't just say, I don't really care and leave it at that. You have to be like, okay, I would eat this or this. Which of those two sounds better to you? And then they'll be like, oh, this one. And at that point, this is like a very helpful way of structuring choice making in all kinds of aspects of marriage, because it allows for men to lead and also it includes choice for women, and everybody's happy. Like, if you're just like, whatever you want, dear, your marriage will fall apart. But in movies and in shows, it's always like, well, you're the boss. It's like, that's my dog, sorry. They're not the boss. And if you let them be the boss of the household, of your family, your marriage will fall apart. They are the boss of some things. So like Paulina and I have this agreement, basically, like, I get my studio man cave reptile room space, and the Zudio, I call it. Um, and she gets the interiors everywhere else to decorate however she chooses. Because I don't really care. Men would sleep on a mattress on the floor with, a laptop and a refrigerator, and we'd be like chilling for life. But women make places beautiful, and you don't realize how nice that is until like your wife actually decorates your place. I can't every time Paulina wants a new rug, I'm like, we don't need a rug. What's the point of a rug? I don't even understand the point of a rug. Every time we get a rug, it's really nice. And it like helps segment the space, and there's like practical things about it with our dogs even. It's like helps them know where they are allowed to go and not. But as a man, I'm just like, what's the point of a rug? But I get control of the outside of the house, and as far as like how it is laid out and whatever, when we have one. We don't have one yet. But so like women need control over certain things, but that's not the same as control and leadership are different. Leadership is not control. Control is like responsibility. It's a better way of putting it. It's like you and your wife should have different responsibilities, not the same responsibilities. Some things are your wife's responsibilities, some are yours, and that which is your wife's responsibilities are also what she is allowed to do with what she wants. And so long as it's not, harming your family for some reason, I don't know, like she's making a choice to paint the walls with lead or something, or you as a man have, your job is protection of the house, and as long as you're doing it responsibly, like she doesn't have a say. When I first started dating Paulina, she did not like guns, and I grew up in a house that did not have guns, and we were not allowed to have guns, and grew up in a pretty anti-gun house. But I am a martial artist and a shooter, and I became personally interested in firearms and training with them and self-defense, and I became accustomed to them and proficient with them. And she said to me before we got married, like long before we got married, we were still just started dating, and she was like, what if I don't want, guns in the house? And I was like, well, I'm going to have guns in the house. I will be responsible with the guns. They are there for our protection, and that is my responsibility. And I'm going to do it how I think is best, and do it safely, obviously. So I wasn't like, you have no choice. The choice is the marriage. She didn't want that. Then she could have been like, okay, I don't want to live in a house with guns, so I'm not going to marry you. I think that's a wrong decision. But, and obviously she thought that would have been the wrong decision too. But the choice marriage is an instance of allowing for choice. So it's like you're choosing your leader as a woman. Okay? Like that's the part of the point of marriage. It's not for women are not property, but they are subject to men in a healthy marriage relationship. So they're not the moral leaders. This is natural. This is not something that you can actually avoid and be like, well, my house, it's different. No. Let me tell you, in every single house in the world, men where there are two people are married, a man and a woman, the woman will eventually adopt, if they stay together, the woman will eventually end up adopting the moral and political ideological views of the man, or they'll move towards it. That doesn't mean you'll align on everything. It just means if one of you was die hard on one side and one of you was die hard on the other, but you get married and you respect each other and you have a good relationship, the woman will always move towards the man. And that is by nature. It's not something that is, I've never heard of it the opposite direction, where a marriage lasted. I've heard of women not moving towards the man, and then what happens is that it's not a healthy marriage, or it ends up falling apart, or it stays together, but it's still, an emasculating and horrible, and we need a word for the female version of emasculating, but it's like defeminizing of women, and we are meant to be like different, and there is a directionality to everything in metaphysics. Order is through metaphysics is about fundamentality. Fundamentality is sentient beings. Sentient beings are fundamental reality, and they have fundamental relationships, and those fundamental relationships within reality are either lineage relationships. You came from your mom, who came from her mom, who came from her mom, who came from her mom, etc. Or they are marital relationships, in which case they are instances of bonding into one. And you don't have a choice who your mom is. It's a non-consensual bond that you have in your lineage of your family. Marriage is where you have an instance in which consent and sovereignty have an opportunity to make a move and a choice and still form permanent bonds. But its definition is that it's permanent. If you divorce outside of specific instances in which a marriage is no longer a marriage because of that said instance, and that does not include people falling out of infatuation, okay? If a marriage is not permanent outside of key specific instances like infidelity, particularly on the part of a woman, fun fact, adultery in the Bible originally in Scripture does not mean men cheating on their wives. It means women cheating on their husbands. The reason why is because when a man cheats on his wife, it's because he wants sex. He probably doesn't even care about that girl as much as not, and he probably still loves his wife. Or he's probably still dedicated to his wife. Not excusing infidelity for anyone, just saying there is a difference in that when a woman cheats on her husband, it is because she is already focused on someone else. She is no longer emotionally attached to the man. It's not because she just had an itch that needed to be scratched. It is because she is disconnected at that point. So basically the marriage is already over. That is why adultery was considered, which is when a woman cheats, is considered, grounds for divorce, even in the most orthodox of cultures. It is because the marriage is already over. That's not true if a man cheats. It is still a sin and horrible, and don't do it. But it's different because men and women are different. And but what's interesting when it comes to thinking about people say in religious communities, secular people think that Orthodox religious communities like Muslims and Orthodox Jews and Orthodox Christians, that it is just a wife's job to give her husband, it is a requirement that a wife gives her husband sex whenever he wants. And this is actually the opposite of a scriptural viewpoint, which is that a man has a responsibility to give his wife sex whenever she wants. And I thought about this for a long time, because I was like, but then is it not also a responsibility of a wife to give a man her husband sex when he wants? And at least, to a reasonable degree, obviously. But then I realized that that's eliminating of gender dynamics. And so what it is that a man has a responsibility to give his wife sex when she wants, for the most part. That doesn't mean every time you have to say yes. It just means, you should aim to usually say yes as a husband. If your wife wants it, you should usually give it to her. Notice the language. if, but it's not a wife's job to give it to the husband. What it is it's a wife's job to, it is that a wife should strive to not give, but to receive, like to be open to receiving sex when a man offers it. So now you have the directionality is preserved, and it's not, if it's a husband's responsibility to give it to his wife when she wants it, and it's a wife's responsibility to give it to her husband when he wants it, this is like this, okay? Like, it's not complementary anymore. But if it's a good husband should strive to give his wife sex whenever she wants it, and a wife should strive to accept sex when it is, given. Then it preserves coherence, okay? This is the metaphysics of of sex in a marriage. And it's kind of a profound revelation, because when you think about even the language that we use, you don't say oh, like that girl's giving it to that guy. Like, you say that guy is giving it to that girl and she's taking it, okay? Like, not to be graphic, but marriage is meant to be a sexual thing. And like I said, we have sexualized everything else except marriage. And we should be not sexualizing anything else except marriage. We should be sexualizing marriage. But it's a tough, because marriage is also an intimate relationship that you do not share private details of, or you shouldn't. Like, intimacy is, by definition, is something that is restricted to, specific people, and not to be shared with the world. But that's why it's harder to bond with people when you slept with tons of them, because it's harder to be intimate with anyone after that, because you've done everything with everyone. It's like, what is there left to do? What do you have left to give someone at that point that you haven't given someone else? But it's we need to find a way to just talk about sex in a marriage that sexualizes it and makes it sexy, because it is a very sexy thing, but also isn't crude. And I'm that is a line that I'm still figuring out, to be quite honest. I err on the side of caution. Does this debunk polygamy? No, multiple women and one man is fine. As long as it's not, I think Islam says 4 women maximum is the 4 wives is the maximum for one man. I think that probably sounds about right, given even the numbers in the metaphysics work that I do. The problem is that when you get more than that, you start running where you're Genghis Khan and he had 80 wives or something. That's not really, you have 80 wives. You have a bunch of concubines and groupies. That's because marriage, by definition, is an intimate relationship. It is one that is restricted to a small group, or just the two of you, or maybe few wives and one man, and it is it's, if you have a bunch of, can't have endless amounts of wives, because you're decreasing the amount of intimacy of a marriage every time you add another one. And even in Islam and other traditional groups who practice polygamy, polygamous marriage is one in which it's a responsibility. It's an added responsibility. It's not like, oh, I just trying to trade, get the new car, like the new model. That's not how it is. It's like someone needed someone to care for them, and you could provide for multiple women, and so you do. But it's honestly, it sounds to me as not the ideal in any way. It's like something you do when there's just not enough men to go around for that are suitable husbands for women. And by the way, that is 100% the case right now. I actually predict that we will have a massive resurgence in polygamy because women need men to commit, and they're not. And so, in fact, it seems to be growing around me. I will say, in the past year, most of the men around me actually stepped up and very quickly, like, all got engaged and married, which was wonderful to see. And because I've talked about this once, I was like in the break room at my past employer. There was like 3 or 4 girls in there, and they were all in their like early mid-30s, and they were just complaining about men, and they were like, all I want is a man to just marry me and have babies with me, and like nobody's doing that. And it made me so sad to see them talking about this, because like I walked in on the conversation, it wasn't meant for me, and I was just like, holy crap, like how have we gotten to this point where there's like, you would like, I just don't think single women, especially if they were, otherwise nothing seriously wrong with them, would exist at 35 years old 100 years ago. It just wouldn't happen. But women are going to start actually being like, you know what, I'd rather share a man than not have one, and I'd rather share a good man than not have any man, or only have horrible man. And I think that polygamy is going to make a comeback. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just kind of out of necessity. But it's an added responsibility. It's not like something that you should try and strive for. It's like something that you do when you have to. You wouldn't, and anybody who's married knows that like adding another wife it's not the same as not being married and just having another girl. It's like you have to, that is way more complicated than just one. And it's kind of fetishized, I guess, in a way that it is, the reality of it is not like that way. And in very traditional cultures, you're not even supposed to share beds with all 3 women and you, or all your wives and you. You're supposed to give each of them their own time with you and their own space. I think in Islam it says every woman should have her own kitchen and her own bedroom, and ideally her own home. But her own kitchen and her own bedroom is basically her own home. And so you're not even supposed to like live in the same house that is like, just the typical house that we would think of today, that's designed for just a married couple. But but marriage will teach you about masculinity, femininity, sex, politics, physics, economics. I have an experiment regarding sentient singularity theory that is related to this, but the economics, a marriage structure is more economical than unmarried individuals. So if you take a man and a woman and you add up all the amount of money that it costs for each of them to survive separately, and then you have them get married and they live together, and then you add up how much money it costs for them to survive, it's now costs less than it would have if they were on their own, and it's actually able to be a profitable like relationship even. We don't talk about the economics of marriage in economics class, but we should, because it's the foundation to a efficient society. You cannot have an economy not fall apart if people stop getting married. People stop getting married, and the majority of people in society are not married anymore, and they are adults who are unmarried. If most people in society are adults who are unmarried, it is impossible for that society to economically be efficient in resources and even in transactions. It's like, especially as we form onto, digital currencies and blockchain, it's like transactions are per individual. So you can reduce the amount of transactions, but maximize the impact of those transactions by being in a marriage. So this has enormous economic uh, um, implications. Plus, people who don't get married don't have children in a higher than above replacement rate. Even if an individual does, and you see, oh, it's like a single wife who has like 6 kids with different guys or something, a single woman with 6 kids with different guys, that is not a sustainable thing. It doesn't continue for 10 generations. It happens like a few generations and then burns out. But if you want growth, you need marriage. And if you can't have kids, then you probably have, mathematically, honestly, at least 3. Because you don't want to replace 2 people with 2 people. Because when you're inside relativity and entropy, you can't stay static. So if you try and stay static, you actually decay. So if you replace 2 with 2, it lowers. You have to go above replacement rate. So there's this big exhibit at the aquarium of the Pacific, and it's like all about like women's empowerment and education across the world. I don't know why it's there, but it is. And it's the biggest room in the aquarium. And it's talking about like human population, and it's how we need to bring down the human replication rate to 2.1 or 2.2 because you need it to be slightly over 2 in order to maintain, but also you can't have it be 2 because then you'll decay. And they're trying to have it stay static. This is just fundamentally a misunderstanding of the universe, the metaphysics of the meta-economics of the universe. Growth is the only way to overcome entropy. You cannot try and stay static by max and not, they're trying to not exhaust the resources. Guys, space-time is emergent. Like, sentient beings are the driving force of growth. Like, we need to grow or we will perish. There's no way to be economically efficient where perfectly the amount that we need of this and this and this is given to us without excess, and we're not replicating and growing the economy at the same time. It's staying static, but also just becoming increasingly efficient to the point where it doesn't end up being a net negative. It's going to end up being a destructive economy instead of a productive economy. You need growth of sentient beings. It's just no way around it. And also, we're about to have a huge population collapse. We're not overpopulated at all. We're about to, like, in 1 generation, we could lose like 1/3 of the population of the Earth. In 2 generations, you could lose half the population of the Earth. Go from 7 billion people to like 3 billion in like 60 years. So this is going to sneak up on us super fast. It's going to cause huge problems. And part of it is because people aren't getting and staying married. And it's like you get married, you have a couple kids, you get divorced. You don't have kids again. But in the past, got married young, prime of your reproductive time, stayed married, had a bunch of kids because it was economically productive to have children. The guy who was the richest had the most kids. And now it's the opposite, but it's not really the opposite because having kids costs money. Nobody is rich because they chose not to have children. People are wealthy, have lots of money for other reasons. And if you had children, you'd probably have more children. You'd probably eventually have more money. It wouldn't detract from your wealth. So, I mean, we're so lost. Like, what is the point of money? It's It's like, oh, well, I can't afford the Corvette because I'm not wealthy because I have to feed my kids. It's like, eventually you probably would be able to get a Corvette because your kids could help be an economic benefit. But the thing is like you might have to put that off for a time. But if you get the Corvette earlier because you don't have as many kids, it's like that Corvette's just going to, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it becomes worth like, only 90% of what it was or less. And each year the value goes down. It's like, how is that economically productive? Not saying there's no point in getting, toys. I'm just saying that isn't, that's not, using resources wisely. There is no resources other than sentient beings. Sentience is the resource. It is the resource that, it is the meaning behind our every action, or it is the meaning that would motivate our sustained effort. And it is also the force that, the constructive force. It is the constructing force. So trying to minimize it, like, is just, it's not wrong. It's not right. It's backwards. In the Bible, it says an unbelieving man can be sanctified through marriage. Yeah. I need to read where that is. I didn't know that, but I believe it. Anyways, any final statements, questions? This has been way too long. I'm going to do a part 2 to this because this was more rambly than I expected. But if you're a man, you should actively seek to get married if you're not married and if you are attracted to the opposite sex. That doesn't mean that you chase women. It means you pursue what is good, and you also date with intention. That's what I'll say. Because your nature will fight against you. Your nature tells you don't get married in our current environment. In an environment that's healthier, where everybody's dressed more modestly and people stay married and you don't have sex outside of marriage, every cell in your body would be pushing you as a man to get married ASAP. But in our secular, liberal, hypersexualized world that we live in, every cell in your body is telling you not to get married. Don't listen to it. It's lying to you. And that's why when I showed, the periodicity of the Hellenic periodicity of sentience right at families, you saw disorder. It is because of this. Our environment is out of step with our instincts at this point. And we have to intentionally, consciously choose to pursue the good. It is not up to women. It is not on women for this change to occur. If a man never proposed to a woman, she would never get married. It is a man who proposes. It's not a woman. He has to take conscious action. And like I said, if you're good at solving problems, find each other attractive physically and personality-wise, personally and physically, you have aligned goals, and what was the final one? Solving problems personally and physically attractive, aligned goals. I think maybe it was just personally attractive and physically attractive, and then aligned goals, and then good at solving problems. Get married. Don't wait on it. And the universe is literally depending on it. I'm not even joking. We're going to do a part 2 where I'm less tired to talk about this. But when I say that universe is depending on it. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. I see people, particularly on the right, because that's usually where I'm from, and they're like, oh, we need to save society, and we just need to get, better leaders and get rid of all these stupid programs in the schools that are immoral and this and that. And it's all this like incel movement, a lot of them, and not all of them, but a lot. And or the what is it? MGTOW, men going their own way, or something like that. As a man, let me tell you, I fully understand the frustration that leads men to be angry at the current situation involving gender dynamics. That doesn't mean that it has to be like that for you. And if you cannot fix society, you can't fix society completely anyways, but you can fix society around you, your community, and yourself and your own family and your own life, and lead by example, which is what a man should do. Men are not meant to force others into doing their will. Severity and dictating and tyranny are feminine attributes. They're not masculine. Benevolence, kindness, and like leading by example are masculine attributes. We just have a warped view of what is masculine. No wonder women hate, they'll say toxic masculinity, because a lot of what we think is masculine is toxic. You think like, oh, being strong and forcing people into doing what you want, like, is masculinity, then that is just toxic. It's not even masculinity, it's toxic. It's actually kind of more feminine, but it's effeminate when it's a man doing something that is more feminine. It is actually effeminate. It's like a watered down fake version of true femininity. I don't think that a man can actually be feminine in his relationship with a woman. And I don't think a woman can be masculine in her relationship with a man. That's why it doesn't come off when a woman is like dresses in the pantsuit and like, asserts herself and leans in, as like Sheryl Sandberg would say, in the business situation. It just comes off as like annoying and obnoxious and forced to men. It's because it's not masculine. It's an attempt to be masculine. Just like when men try and be feminine, it ends up just being like dramatic. It's because it's like an attempt to be feminine, but it's not actually feminine. It's just that men view femininity as dramatic and emotionally like spastic. And that's not real femininity, but that's what men view it as. So when men try and be feminine, that's what they end up becoming. But when women try and be masculine, they end up being like cold, heartless, ruthless. That's not masculine. Masculine is kind and benevolent and leading by example. It's not enough to just like tell people to get married. You have to show them that it's possible. Watch my YouTube video of my wedding. But it is an intentional choice. You cannot wait until like, oh, I meet the right girl. What does that even mean? Like, you don't know what that means. As a man, if you say I'm waiting for the right girl, you have to attract the right girl. Like, yeah, by pursuing the life that you would want with, a wife. And then, you will come across the girl that fits into that situation. Benevolent and an example. But yeah, anyways, peace, guys. Thank you. Involve this. And because everything else and that is social application, including, everything from immigration to economics to, nationality and stuff. It all comes from this. So while some people may want warp speed and anti-gravity, and that would be cool, and I do think that sentient singularity theory is relevant to that, you're going to be just as miserable if this is not fixed. We're still doomed even if we get anti-gravity. So, quote unquote anti-gravity. But anyways, with that, the Discord call, weekly Discord call, will be this Thursday at 7 p.m. On the Discord. If you would like to join it, send me a private message on Instagram. Like I said, we will definitely be doing another one of these soon, and I'm going to have Paulina on here as on the part 2, where we talked about it a bit, and I will be not exhausted. And then I also suggest that you take a look at the links below to sentientsingularity.com. Share this content. Please like it. Please leave a comment on your thoughts down below, and it helps fuel the algorithm. And also Patreon link below if you would like to contribute to this project monetarily. It does help. I have used it to buy mics and lights and cameras and all kinds of things that have helped. But yeah, that's it. Peace.